In section 3.2, we're going to look at solving multi-step inequalities. The steps for solving the multi-step inequalities are actually very similar to that of section 3.1 with multi-step equations. In this, we're looking at inequalities instead, but step 1 is the same. We're going to use the distributive property and combining like terms to simplify each side. We're going to then, in step 2, use addition or subtraction to separate or isolate the variable term and the constant terms. And then we're going to use the multiplication or division in step 3 to eliminate our variable's coefficient. And then finally, in step 4 and 5, we can check our solution, make sure that our answer makes sense in context to the problem, especially if there's a word problem, and then for the word problems, answer in a complete sentence. So let's look at our first example here. We have negative 9x minus 9 is less than negative 27. And if we look at both sides, we already have them in simplest simplest forms. There are no like terms, so we can move on to step 2, which has us to separate the variable term from the constant term. So we'll start with moving that constant term using inverse operations. We're going to add 9 to both sides. And once we have that, we can move on to step 3, which is multiply or divide to eliminate our coefficient. Our coefficient is that negative 9. It's being multiplied to the x, so we're going to do the opposite. Our inverse operation is dividing. And with this being an inequality, since we are dividing by a negative number, we need to make sure that we reverse that sign in our answer. And we can always check our work by replacing our variable. And remember that when we replace a variable for an inequality, we actually don't always replace it with the number. We want to look at what the inequality tells us. So in this case, it says that x is going to be greater than 2. So I want to pick a number that's larger than 2. And then look to see if I have a true statement. It'll help if I actually multiply correctly. And if I take 27 and I take away 9, I'm going to obviously get something that is less than 27. And so I do indeed have a true statement. So let's look at this other example here on the right. Step 1 says to simplify. We actually do need to simplify this time because on the left side we have 2 variable terms and on the right side we have 2 constant terms. So we're going to start by using our properties of equality and do some simplifying here to get one set of each of them on each side. And now we can go on to step 2, which is using addition or subtraction to separate or isolate the variable. And you actually get to decide whether I want the variable to be on the right or the left. It's up to you. I like the variable to be on the left side, so I will go ahead and move my 5 over to the other side. And I want to move my variable so that my variables are together. And last thing, step 3 is to do the multiply or divide to get our variable term by itself, and we're divided by a coefficient. And we get that A is greater than 2. And of course, you can check your solution by picking a number that is greater than 2, once again, for example, 3, plugging it into the original problem and seeing that it is indeed a true statement.